I lost my husband when I was 22 years old. When I was 7 weeks pregnant with my daughter, Basia. Very sudden. There was no prior health issues, all that stuff.
I was married for about 8 years. I have 2 boys from my first marriage. Single dad for a little bit. And then, voila.
I definitely did not expect to marry someone 10 years older than me with 2 kids. If anything, I thought I was going to marry someone 1 year older than me, never been married before, had no kids.
I wasn't really interested in dating for a long time, honestly. And I'll never forget, this friend of my friend's wife was sitting at the table. She's like, oh my gosh, you should date Hair by Pen. You're going. She's a widow. So I was like, okay, thank you. You and everyone else have brilliant ideas. I just am trying to make it through the week and function, But obviously on Saturday night, I went on Instagram and I checked her out. And I was like, oh, who's this person? And
I'm willing to go out with someone who's divorced or, older and single, but I kept saying no kids, no kids. I kept saying it. Literally never say never.
Hi, welcome back to Stories of Hope. I want to personally thank you on behalf of the Meaningful Minute team for spreading the mission, supporting the mission. The only way this is actually going to be a successful mission is with your support. Thankfully, this past week, tens of thousands of people have come forward to say that this podcast has significantly affected the quality of their life. That can only happen with your help. Please don't underestimate a share. Don't underestimate a post. Don't underestimate a comment. It takes a village. It takes really a bunch of people who are willing to make a difference to change something that's needed to change for a very long time. I can't do it alone. Please rate, review, and subscribe and continue to help us with this exciting change by doing whatever you can to be a part of it. This week, we have an unbelievable episode for you. Penina and Aryeh share their story of loss to love. Something that's often underestimated is the amount of grief experienced in dating. There's grief of opportunity. There's grief of hope. And in this case, there's grief of physical loss. I think you're going to love this episode. Learn so much from it on how to help someone else and how to deal with your own grief that can come up in so many different ways. Thank you, Penina and Aryeh, for joining the Mission for Change. Here's episode 2 of Stories of Hope with Aryeh and Penina Kunstler, Finding Love After Loss. Hi, I'm Tzipora Grodko, and this is the Stories of Hope podcast. Well, I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you so much for coming in, Penina and Aryeh. It is an honor. I will be asking for autographs later and some hair tips. No questions asked.
That's not from me, right?
Your hair looks good.
Thank you. So I had a lot, I knew there was pressure. I'm like, okay, today's not a messy bun. I'm going to have the icon Hair by Pen. Got to up my game. And Aryeh, I don't know if you know this, but my parents are Bali Tshuva. We did not grow up with Jewish music in my house. And your music was actually the first Jewish music that I heard that I was like, this stuff's really good.
Thank you.
So I feel like I never got to properly say thank you. And now's a pretty cool time to do that.
He loves fangirls.
So thanks for coming here. Your story is unbelievable and everyone is really excited to hear about it. So we'll jump in first by Penina. You share a little bit about your background, where you're from, and then we'll jump to Aryeh.
Okay. Hi, I'm Penina. Seabag, but now Kunstler. I grew up in Passaic. Pretty regular background, but my father is actually Moroccan. My mom is from a super Hungarian background. So a lot of strong, I don't know what you would call
Fire?
it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I grew up pretty mainstream. I went to Manhattan for high school. I'm the oldest of 4. And I actually got married when I was 21. And my first husband passed away 6 months after we got married. And I was 7 weeks pregnant with my daughter, Basia, who a lot of people see on my Instagram. And yeah, that's basically the background / beginning.
Wow.
So, yeah.
The background at the beginning, I remember, I think, are we the same age?
How old
I'm
are you?
30.
I'm a year younger than you.
Okay. So I remember when hearing that your husband passed away and thinking, I think that was my first exposure to anyone in my age and stage
Yes.
that had gone through something so
Yeah.
unimaginable, and thinking, how is that possible? And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about your experience. And I remember hearing about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people, when they meet me, they're like, I remember where I was when I heard that this happened. It's very interesting.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. Thank you. Aryeh, stage is yours.
Grew up Belle Harbor, New York, small town in between Far Rockaway and Brooklyn on the beach. I was a beach boy growing up. Went to Darche through elementary school and high school, youngest of 4 brothers. So it was very much a boy life growing up, all men in the house. Went to Israel, started a music career, weddings, and got married when I was 25. Was married for about 8 years. Have 2 boys from my first marriage. Got divorced in 2018, and single dad for a little bit, and then voila.
I know we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there.
I'm holding the suspense there. A little bit. Yeah.
Wow. So 2 completely different backgrounds, completely different experiences, both independently challenging in their own right. Penina, tell us a little bit about what your experience was like.
So I lost my husband when I had just turned 22. Very sudden. There was no like prior health issues, all that stuff. I was very young. I was newly pregnant. I moved back in with my family. They were amazing. My family, my friends, like the support system was obviously everything. But yeah, it was staggering because it was so much. I say a lot now that I look back from where I am now, and I'm 29. So I look back and I'm like, wow, I was so young. And I process it so differently now that I'm older, and I look at it so differently. Also, the facts are that as I get older, I surpass, his name was Mayer's age, and I see my daughter and how old she is, and it's wild. As you get older, you just look back and I think you process grief differently multiple times over. And like, I'm not a super emotional person, so people wouldn't necessarily know that about me, but it's like internally processing all the time. So yeah, it's just, I guess you mourn differently at different stages of your life.
Yeah.
It's like a different kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think it sounds like what you're saying is there's different experiences through life that you have. What's your daughter's name? Basia. There's different experiences that you have with Basia that Mayer's not at.
Right.
And that creates new forms of grief.
Yeah, basically.
And someone, someone that may be listening or know someone that lost a loved one may think, oh, many years passed, they're in a different place.
Right.
They're fine now. And I just want to encourage everyone to continue to be sensitive, because grief is always there. It just comes in different sizes.
And it's also all over
places.
the place. Yeah.
Was there something at that time when you lost Mayer, was there something that you needed that maybe those that are listening who know someone that lost someone young? I mean, there's Samchenu, there's all these organizations for people. Right. And unfortunately, they're very full with all different ages. Is there something that you needed?
So it's actually interesting when this happened. It was 2018. In 2018, there was nobody who was 22 years old and widowed. There may have been like single mothers, but I mean, there were for sure. But like my specific situation, thankfully, I didn't know anyone in the same situation as me, which is very isolating. But years later, people definitely reach out to me all the time. Unfortunately, it's become a little more, I don't want to say common because it's not common, but it's something that we hear about from time to time. So I have spoken to people who have been in my situation. And I think like one of the only things I kept saying is like people would like show up to the Shiva and I had no idea who they were. Hundreds and hundreds of people, which is very nice because collectively we're a great nation. But I think when something like that happens, it's very hard when strangers show up and they want to tell you like, their hardship and then you're comforting them. I think that was very hard for me. I was just like, I didn't have the capacity for that. Most of the time I was basically just not talking and kind of like tuning it out. I really just wanted like the people that I was close to be around me because I just wanted to feel normal. And I think that's a big thing, like treating your friends as normal if they're going through something like that, treating your family members as normal. Nobody wants to be like pitied and like babied and like, you just want to like, if you want to go for coffee, just be like, let's go to Starbucks. I don't want it to be like, let's go to Starbucks to take your mind off things, sweetie. I was very like, just treat me normal. Like, I want to go to the mall. I want to just do everything that I was doing before to make it a little easier.
Yeah.
Like I didn't want this like grand fanfare. I'm sure there are people who appreciate that though. Like, I don't want to say it's like, that's not the baseline for everyone. Yeah. But for me personally, I was just like, please act normal. Like,
yeah. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why we have the halacha when someone's sitting shiva, that they're not supposed to speak to the person mourning until the person speaking.
I think people forget that
welcomes them in.
Yeah.
And it's hard for people to know what to do. And I think it's always cool to see that Torah is like, I got you. Like, I'll tell you what to do.
I think also like people, this is actually something I experienced recently, not towards myself, but I was actually at a shiva for someone that I know. And people sitting there were like inquiring about like cause of death and, details and all these things. And I was just sitting there. I was like, felt like a deer in headlights. I was like, okay. I was like, first of all, unless you are their family member and you're asking them in private, it really doesn't matter. But also, like, I feel like you could see the pain on their face and somehow everyone else in the room was missing that. It's like, it doesn't matter. Go for the mitzvah, but don't go to, like, pry and find out. I feel like people do that a little bit out of anxiety, I think. I always say this. They're so nervous when they hear about a situation where someone passed. They're like, let me just make sure that that's something that couldn't happen to me, which, of course, is not accurate. Hashem runs the world. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Yeah. So I guess that's really the only things that.
Yeah, that's really valuable. That's really, really valuable. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
And, Aryeh, as you're listening to Penina share all of this, kind of like what's going through your mind?
I can't even imagine, being in her position, young and like that. Honestly, it's, sometimes I forget, like we're married now a little over 3 years. And sometimes I forget that whole thing. Like our family, thank God, over time has really integrated well. And Basia's, mine, she's my daughter in the same way that my boys are my boys. And now our new daughter is our new daughter. It's like there's no difference in our house. And so because it's actually, there's a nice sense of normal, I very often forget that. With me, it's very easy to remember that, I got divorced or whatever, because like my boys come back and forth between the two houses. So there's, it's a constant reminder here about Basia's, and that I always say like Basia in a way has like somewhat of more like stable and normal life than my boys do. Because she's living in one house, with two parents there. So it's very easy to forget that Penina went through all that. And sometimes like it clicks in my mind. I'm just like, it's crazy, but her strength through it, is, has definitely helped her overcome and persevere and grow a lot to get to where she is today.
Yeah. Yeah. Penina, well, like anew, if we stopped here, I could tell everyone like, all right, we're done. Just let that marinate.
Podcast over.
Wow. Wow.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. And you share it with so much strength and dignity. And I really appreciate your openness, because that's what people can relate to, and that's what they can learn from. And, as you're grieving and managing through this process, I don't even like the word managing, because it's coping and learning.
Yeah.
And you're pregnant, right?
Was
pregnant.
I had a baby.
No.
I mean, while you're sitting
Scratch
shiva.
that.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
While you're sitting shiva, you're pregnant.
Yeah, I was newly pregnant. Most people did not know I was pregnant, obviously. I was only 7 weeks. thankfully I had just told my parents that I was expecting, so I didn't have to drop any bombs on anyone. But yeah, it was definitely scary, and it's interesting because I just had a baby. So it was interesting. People were asking me like, wow, like, was that super different? And like, what was it like? And what's it like now? And I want to say that like, obviously it was extremely different. But because I didn't know anything else, I guess I just didn't, I thought it was going to be like this major shift. And I guess like it was very nice because I have a partner, but it was like, oh, okay. Like, I guess this is what normal people do.
Right.
Like,
Wow.
I just never had the normal experience, I guess.
Right. You had a baby as a single grieving mom.
Yeah, it was definitely different, but because I didn't know anything else, I guess I didn't feel that like missing.
Wow.
You know, you're sad because the person isn't there, but you have no idea what it would have been like anyways. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow, it's unbelievable. And while you're raising your baby, you said you were back at home,
Yes.
right? When did you even, I mean, I have so many questions, but to keep the podcast focused on the theme, when did you even start to consider, maybe I want to now date someone, maybe I want to try this again? I mean, what you went through was so scary. And then what you're still navigating is so difficult. Tell us a little bit about that process.
So actually, I don't know if people know this, but there's actually a lot of halacha around being pregnant, having a baby, and your husband passing away. So you actually have to wait a certain amount of time. I think it's 18 months.
Wow.
Before you could even consider it. If you want to look up all that halachic background, you could, but I'm not going to get into it here. So actually, I met Aryeh. She was how old? A year?
I mean, she had just turned a year.
She had just turned 1 year old. I was not thinking about dating, not even based on the halacha aspect, but just because I just was not even thinking about it. I work, I was a mother, I lived with my family, like I felt secure. I didn't really feel like starting to look for someone new. And I think it was honestly too daunting anyways. I was like, I mentally can't even go there. God was very good to me because I naturally met him. So it was,
wow.
It was definitely put in my hands, honestly, like literally like put in my hands. But yeah, there was actually no point at which I thought I wanted to date again. Someone did set me up maybe like once or twice, and I agreed, and I went out like on a shidduch date. But the whole time just felt like really weird. It felt like I was I felt like I was an actor, like on a date with like my baby sleeping at home in a crib. Like
Such
it was
like
just
an unnatural.
It was
experience.
so unnatural. I was
Yeah.
like, I don't think I can do this. I know there are people who can do it. They can shidduch date with kids. Like I knew right away it wasn't going to work for me. I was like, there's no way. I said either a friend is going to have to set me up or I'm going to have to meet someone somewhere, which was a little harder, obviously, because like, you know, I wasn't in a situation where I was ever without my child. So I always was on as a mother. Right. So it's not like I was going out a lot or like meeting people. So there wasn't like a whole lot of opportunity to meet people naturally. So I just figured eventually somehow someone will come along.
So I want to ask you about that. Did you ever have any doubt during this process that you would never meet someone that you could love the same way you loved Meir?
I think it wasn't so much about love. I think that's like a little bit of a myth sometimes. Mm-hmm. Did I think I could ever like move forward fully? I think I was thinking I could, but more of the question of how hard did I want to work for it? It's like a big deal. Like people would ask me what I wanted next, and I would say like, you know, I'm willing to go out with someone who's divorced or, you know, older and single, but I kept saying no kids, no kids. I kept saying it. Literally never say never. So
wow. And I appreciate you sharing that because I would imagine there are people listening who can relate to their own grief, who may be thinking, this is how could I ever move forward, or how could I ever meet someone? Or also maybe they have reasons that they think they can't be with someone, and yet here the two of you are.
It's definitely weird because I think also I was very, very young. And then when I got remarried, I was 25. Yeah, I was 25. So it was very different. It was a very different kind of relationship. And I think that's also something, you're not going to be looking for the same thing. It's going to be different. It's going to be new, a new person, new background, everything. So it's funny because people talk about, comparison, right? Are you comparing one to the other? No, you can't. You can't compare.
Is that a question you get asked a lot?
Sometimes. Like in private, people would have asked me that. Like, people who are dating second time around, or people who are experiencing, the passing of their significant other.
And is the question, do you compare, or how do you not compare?
I think it's both.
Okay.
They ask me both. And I always tell people there's really no, in my experience, there has been no comparison because they're such different people and it's such different relationships, and I'm a different person. You are a totally different person by the time you get there. Like, I look back, I don't even necessarily recognize myself.
We were just talking about that.
Yeah. Like, I'm completely different.
Right.
It's actually like a little weird sometimes. You feel almost like a disconnect to the person that you were at a certain point because it's been so long. Mm-hmm. It's like, logically, I remember it happening. I remember myself. I remember the sequence of events. But emotionally, I'm like in another planet.
Wow.
It's really crazy. So that's why I feel like there's really no comparison. And I feel like once you move forward, you're already someone else.
Right.
You're someone new with someone new. And if you don't feel like you've changed a lot, then you're probably not there yet.
That's really, really valuable. And during this process, Aryeh, you were divorced. And I'm curious to hear what your experience was like while you were divorced as this very public person in the community where everyone loves making suggestions and asking questions and doing it all over again. And every night you're in a different place. And the opportunity for that to happen multiple times is very possible. So I'm just curious to hear what your experience was like through this. I guess we could call it like navigating being single.
Yeah. I mean, I have a little caveat in terms of being, single post-divorce is that I'm a Cohen. So right away, it took a nice chunk of the people that would be set up with me, like right off, like any divorcees, like wipe them off the table because like there's no shot. I wasn't really interested in dating for a long time, honestly. I'm very good at like settling into circumstance. So like I settled into my, new life. I threw myself into being the best single dad that I can be. I honestly enjoyed it a lot. So right away, people were starting to come up with suggestions and this and that. And I went out with a couple of people like here and there, but my mind was not in like the frame of mind, like that I wanted to get remarried in a way that I was like, kind of like this works for me, but people are persistent. And people were trying to set me up all the time, be it at weddings. Like I did a wedding once where the whole manager walked over to me. He's like, that girl, you should go over to her, introduce herself. Like everyone was always on the lookout for it. It definitely was interesting. I would say I'm definitely more in the public eye now, partially because of Penina, but also because my career, I like shifted my focus in my career to focus on being like the name Aryeh Kunstler as an artist, as opposed to being like a wedding professional. So it wasn't so like giant, like, oh my gosh, it wasn't like this giant pressure at all. But it was like, I didn't feel a pressure. I didn't feel pressure. I surrounded myself with good people, like good guys who all, a lot of them, some of them single, and some of them divorced. And we kind of like had like this chevra of guys. We actually, one thing that was really great, and that's kind of how you meet like-minded people, is that we actually started like a little group for like single dads to navigate the intricacies of being a single dad. Like none of us had been single dads before. We always had a wife who was also taking part in the kids, and just like, how do you deal with certain things, and like very constructive. And from there you meet, different types of people who are also navigating dating and should I get remarried. I'm actually happy to say most of our chevra, pretty much almost everyone in like our group of guys is remarried.
Wow.
With kids, with their
Wow.
new spouses. And I think because the post-divorce world, it's very tricky. You're in your 30s. You have no idea like who you are and who you're going to become. Like you had this idea of what life is supposed to be. And now you're suddenly cast into this entire new world, which is a totally different world of being single than I was when I was in my early 20s. And I think it's important. Like, I always tell people when they ask me, like, guys going like, what do I do? I said, like, it's very easy to just like get lost and figure it out or rush into dating. Like, find like-minded people who are growth-oriented people because they'll be able to help you through this process. Like, I would not be where I am today without certain friends of mine that were there, and we all like kind of talked each other through the processes. And it was a good time. And then like everyone kind of slowly like never got stuck in being a single dad. Getting remarried after being a single dad is very tricky. And we all now share, we're our own little support group in that, in that regard.
Yeah.
But that's kind of,
that's really powerful because if someone's listening and they're a single dad and they're thinking, what next or how, or like you said, it's very tricky and maybe they're gravitating towards a place that they're not proud of. It sounds like surrounding yourself with really healthy people, getting the support you need, helps you stay focused on what you want and who you want to become.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, that's really amazing. It's really amazing that you had that group of people. And, as you're talking and you're sharing, I wasn't ready to start dating. That's not what I wanted to do yet. I'm thinking, right, because Penina wasn't doing that yet. So the timing had to align. But that was really, really powerful. And I hope that those that are listening that are struggling can really gain a lot from that. So let's hear how the two of you met. You said you knew in your gut, this isn't going to work for me. And Hashem said, yeah, well, right. That's my plan. Yeah. Tell us what happened next.
Well, it started with me, really.
Right. It really starts with him. Although I didn't know this until after. So you can start.
So I was at a Shabbos meal by a friend's house. It was probably not so long after Basi was born. I don't even think I was separated at the time, and obviously not in any frame of mind to date or to move on or whatever. And I'll never forget this friend of my friend's wife was sitting at the table. She's like, "Oh my gosh, you should date Hair by Pen. You're going. She's a widow."
Her name's not Penina. It's you should date Hair by Pen.
Yeah, no.
Right, first name Hair by, last name Pen.
I have no name. No, I'm just my Instagram handle.
They're both in the wedding business. Like, oh my gosh, it would be perfect. You have kids. She has a daughter. Like, Manu Basio probably was like a month or two old. No, I mean, she's probably like a couple of months old at this point.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, like, thank you. You and everyone else have brilliant ideas. Like, I just kind of am trying to make it through the week and function, But obviously on Saturday night, I went on Instagram and I checked her out. I was like, oh, who's this person? And I don't know, I've like something like kind of clicked in my head that I found her very interesting. She had a swagger. She had a swagger about her on Instagram.
Yeah, she's
like,
got great swag.
Yeah, like that kind of, the story intrigued me also. Like there's something, I don't know, there's something spoke to me, and I wouldn't call it stalked, but I followed her on Instagram for a while. I kind of always hoped that if I was at a wedding and I would meet sometimes like I would schmooze with the hairstylist and the makeup artist, like, so the bands and we all overlap at different points. I was like, oh, one day I'm going to do a wedding. She's going to be out. Like, maybe I'll meet her. Let's see if that's cool. In the meantime, like, I never met her. I remember there was actually one wedding.
Yeah, I was
so excited because I knew she was going to be there. And I show up and she left. I usually I wear I dress well by a wedding.
You upped your game by that wedding.
Like I put on 110%.
Wow.
Yeah, but she wasn't there. So,
man, wow.
Yeah, it's all right. The way it ended up being was like much better, you know?
Yeah.
So a friend of mine who kind of knew about this thing, and she also had this great idea. Like the first time I met her, she was like, shout out to Cyril.
Yes.
She was always like, you need to date Hair by Pen. You know, like a lot of people after that first time came up with that idea, Kohen, widow, wedding business.
Right. Because I feel like people also don't know this, that halachically he can only marry someone who's never been married before or someone whose husband has passed.
Yeah.
People actually don't know that. It's
a lot of people.
Interesting. Yeah.
So people actually, to go back to that, people actually ask me like all the time, like, was it hard for you? I was like, no, it was like, give me a very specific demographic to work with when I would eventually be ready.
And I have a quick question for you. Were you ever concerned, like, how am I going to find someone? Never.
No, because the amount of people trying to set me up after was, you know, it was crazy.
Yeah.
It was a lot. And, you know, there are a lot of girls, you know, in their late 20s and early 30s who are single, waiting to find the right guy. And, you know, so
intellectually, you're like, there's no reason why
I was never stressed about it. I was never stressed about it ever. I also like really, even like going into the story, like I didn't even go into wanting to date Penina with a frame of mind about like getting married. Like I never had that pressure in my head because like I settled into a life that kind of worked for me. Have a very good relationship with my ex. So like working with, you know, moving nights around if I have a wedding or different things, like all the pieces were just relatively, you know, smooth. But anyway, so Cyril saw on Penina's Instagram, she's like, she's running the Miami Marathon.
Yeah, I was running for High Lifeline
in memory of her husband.
In memory of my husband, 2019. Yeah. In 2019. So I had my own team. So, you know, people sign up. I don't know how they do it now. I think it's similar.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You needed a certain amount of people. And if you join a team, you raise a certain amount of money, you get certain perks and you raise more money, etc.
Mind you, I had never run more than like 5 feet.
Aryeh is like, if someone was chasing me, I ran. Otherwise, there was no reason to.
So this is the funny part that I never knew. I think they literally hid this from me for many, many, many months.
Till after we were married.
I don't know if that's creepy or not. Okay.
Did it work?
Yeah, I guess so. My friend, Cyril, who I kind of knew through Instagram, actually, weirdly enough, messaged me and she was like, hey, I saw that you have a team and you're looking for signups. I want to join your team. I was like, okay, great. I gave her the information. And then she follows up and she's like, oh, I also have a friend who he also wants to join the team. I was like, oh, okay, cool. I was like, what's the name? She's like, Aryeh Kunstler. I'm like, don't know him. Gave her the information and moved on. And that was it. So they added them to my team. And
the drama behind, she says it's like, oh, like we got added to the team. Like first I had to decide that I wanted to run the marathon. Then I was like, once I'm going to be there and run the marathon, like I got to figure out how to perform at the marathon because that's going to make me look great in this situation. And so like I called the head of the team, Lifeline, Moshe Turk, and he's like, oh my gosh, yeah, I happen to have done a couple of songs for Cam Simcha and Chai Life. And he's like, we're going to do it. And we did Fight Song. He's like, we're going to do it by the Pasta Party, which is like this huge event. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the way. Anyway,
wow, you had a Mission Impossible game plan.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Penina was just like, added to my team.
Wait, Sarah, before that though, like you had to hit a certain fundraising goal to get onto a team.
Yeah, it's high.
So when I hit that fundraising goal, I think because all my friends were like, oh, single Aryeh is running the marathon, let's support him. Because the next, like after we got married, I was like, guys, I'm raising money. They're like, you're good. So Cyril's like, oh my God, she needs people on her team. We can be on the team. You can be on the team. A whole thing. I was like, it was a whole drama thing going behind the scenes. She hyped it up. I mean, we really consider her our shadchan, like in a way, like, cause she like put this whole plan into motion.
She was the wing woman.
She was the wing woman. And next thing you know, we're in Miami for the marathon. And
then once I saw you, I knew who you were.
When did you see him?
On Thursday Friday when we got to the marathon in Miami. you meet your team because you're all picking up your stuff.
Right.
Everyone's like around. There's a lot of people. And you introduced yourself to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
what was that like?
Wow,
Tell
it was
us.
so long ago.
I was, it happened to be, you were talking to Cyril, which is the funny thing.
Yeah.
I was walking, I think she may have texted me. She's like, I think I'm talking to Penina now. Like I'm talking to her. You should come. I happened to have been walking by and I said, by the way, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Aryeh Kunstler. I'm on your team. And she said, oh, you're famous. I was like, oh, right back at you. And that was,
because fun fact, I remembered that back in the day when we had iPods. Okay.
Yep.
And I went on the bus to school because I was in high school when he was making music because we're 10 years apart.
Amazing.
I remembered that his music was on my iPod.
yeah.
That's pretty epic.
I was like, oh, I know who this is.
That's pretty much how we met.
That's
And
how
then
we met.
somehow throughout the marathon, myself, Cyril, Penina, and her friend Atara all ended up in a group chat because our team chat was not exactly lively and fun.
Mm-hmm.
And
We made
then-
a side chat.
Yeah, so we made a side chat. So we all kind of, but like nothing really happened on
No.
the marathon weekend. Like
We just became friendly. Like
Yeah.
I knew him, he knew me. I
It was a
didn't know
soft
there
launch.
was a long game.
I did
Right.
see her on the marathon itself, huffing and puffing on the
Well,
side.
Ari, I
and
was going to ask
offered
you
to
at
save her.
4:45 a.m. What was going through your mind?
Oh, I just wanted to survive that run.
Yeah.
I wasn't really.
He was much faster than me. I actually didn't train for my first marathon.
Ooh.
It was bad. Do not
Ooh.
recommend. I trained for the subsequent ones, but
I trained.
he trained.
Once I was
so
doing
he
it, I would
passed
do
Tell
by
us your
me.
time. Tell us your time.
And my time now is not my time then. I wasn't fat. I also was super humid. So like I was,
It was a bad
dying
one.
like
It was a bad
5,
one that
5,
year.
6 miles in.
I was dying on the side of the road, and then he like flew past me, and he's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine."
she did not want any help. But we
No.
became like friendly. We had like this little
Yeah.
chat thing, but nothing like I didn't ask her out. I didn't know I wasn't sure what her deal was. Like also you meet somebody or you see somebody's personality on social media and it's not
It's not the
necessarily
same.
how they are in real life. And I was like, whoa, she's different than like how I imagined her on Instagram. I was like, okay, interesting. Like, I'm not sure. Like,
It's kind of funny because that's, I think, how most people perceive people on social media
Mm-hmm.
is you see someone and you see snippets of their personality or whatever they're showing to you. So you assume that you know them and then you meet them in person. You're like, wow, that was a totally different experience than I imagined because you're imagining it.
100%. Yeah.
So now put that into like wanting to date somebody. You're like,
Yeah.
I just wasn't. I was just thrown because I had built this idea of her in my head.
Yeah.
But I started.
Eventually he asked me out.
Yeah, I
And
started
that was
just
it.
like dropping
Yeah.
comments on her Instagram stories.
He asked me for a book recommendation. Wow, you really were.
Did you read that
stalker.
book?
I did.
Oh,
What was it?
I don't remember.
Oh.
It
wow.
was-
And
He
so
worked
eventually, Aryeh, you did a great job.
I put in the work.
He put in the
He
work.
played the long game, guys. That's the key.
And he also gave you a chance because
Yes.
it sounds like you said initially when you met her, you thought, oh, I thought I had a different expectation.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then you gave her a chance.
yes.
And honestly, like getting to know her, also just understanding the story as well. It's not divorce sometimes, whatever, it's different. You're kind of moving on from an existing marriage and you're looking to start a new life. You don't know what attachments are still there in terms of losing a spouse. And there were times I had to really sit down and reconsider, like, or take into consideration, like, if this is right for me, because like it's heavy, like we discussed, but
Yeah.
ultimately I decided, yeah, that's right, I can handle it.
Yeah. Wow.
And we dated for 1.5 years. So it wasn't like quick by
Yeah.
any means. It was long. We also have kids. That takes time. You want it to take time.
Yeah.
That's something people always ask us about. So.
Right. Yeah. And that was actually one of my questions. You shared what your experience was like. What would you say to someone that has been suggested to people and has said, I will never end up with someone who has kids. And
Yeah.
then they're suggested to someone and they have kids. From your experience, what might you share to someone that's listening that's thinking, hey,
So I can only speak from, I was already a mother. So I can only speak from that end of things. I already had a child, but because I didn't have, I wasn't sharing her with anyone. I felt like the best situation for me was to find someone that did not have kids. Obviously, on many levels, that's easier. But at the same time, I did go out with people who didn't have kids. And like, I didn't realize it beforehand, but like the first question in front of my brain was, are you ready to be a father overnight? And most of the time I felt like the answer was probably not. It was going to be a huge learning curve for them. I think it takes like a very emotionally in tune person to take on someone else's children when they haven't yet had their own. I know very few people like that. So yeah, I think obviously you want to tell everybody, be open-minded, be open-minded. I will not sit here and lie to you. It's very hard to blend your family. It's not this like magical overnight Brady Bunch situation. You have to really, really want it. Like, you have to be willing to put in the work. You have to be willing to work on yourself. This is not about like couples therapy and sitting there complaining to each other. I think this is wrong. You think this is wrong. You have to be willing to work on yourself and change things in yourself. And you have to also kind of earn the respect of your spouse's children. Like there's like a level of like respect earned on both ends.
Yeah.
It sounds funny because I think most people wouldn't assume that, but it's much harder once you're in it.
Yeah.
So I think you have to want it.
Yeah. And I think that's...
Give it a chance, but want it.
Yeah. I think that's like one of the most valuable things that someone can hear from a blended family, because if someone's expectation is that things should be a smooth, easy transition and they aren't, then they're very scared, they're distressed, and they think they're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
But to know that that's actually a norm, that it's it can be a very difficult navigation and adjustment, and there's things to learn, is probably really healthy for someone that wants to learn, is adjusting, to hear like that is actually normal. I think an issue is that often we misrepresent an experience. And then when people have a normal experience with distress, with experiencing distress or being confused, they think something's wrong with them. When the reality is that life is very new and it's ever evolving for all of us. And the way that we learn is through hearing people's honest experiences, which is something I'm so grateful that you both share today, your honest experience of the challenges, of the insight and the bravery I think it takes to try new things. And I think it's very, very hopeful for those that are listening that can relate to so many different parts of your story in so many different ways. And I want to ask both of you if there's any last minute thought, story, experience you had that you just want us to end off on.
I do want to say, and this is something we talk about like in my group of friends, like in the remarriage thing, especially coming from divorce. Like you spend some time as a single parent and you get very comfortable with doing things in your way. And it's hard to bring that in because now somebody is doing it a different way. And when you get like remarried, keep in mind in a divorce situation that you're now getting another opportunity to set an example for your children of what a healthy marriage can be. And sometimes, that involves like breaking habits of doing things the way you work, like a single dad, doing things the way, that we like to do. A spouse is also there to make you see things in ways that you didn't see. There are certain things in how I was raising my boys and continue to do so after we got married that it was very easy for one to say like, she's just nagging and being annoying or like just trying to disrupt what I had. It was no, she saw things that I wasn't seeing that actually could have been could have had a lot of negative effects as my boys got older. And because Penina saw it from a second outsider, and then being able to acknowledge that and build a healthy marriage through blending a family, like I feel that it's very, like, I think it's very safe to say that like we work hard to set that example for them that yes, like my first marriage didn't work out. Like I said before, like we have a great relationship with my ex and her husband, and they also work hard to set an example for my boys of what a healthy marriage should be. But to keep that in mind, like in the difficulties of blending a family and getting remarried, like you have a second opportunity now to do that, and it shouldn't be taken lightly.
Wow. That's like a #1 bestseller if I haven't heard.
We're gonna get there.
That's like 450 pages in 2 minutes. It sounds like it takes a lot of humility.
I said we should start a podcast.
Yeah. Well, I'll be your first viewer. But it sounds like it takes a lot of humility for someone to be able to say what I thought worked. Let me suspend my ego and really respect this person who I chose because I respect them, what they suggest I should do. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
I feel like honestly, you just have to remember that you're on the same team. That was very hard. It's way harder than I'm making it sound.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds casual.
No, it's profound.
When you're like getting remarried, there's kids involved. Everyone's coming to the table with like a lot. It's so easy to like lose sight. So, it could take years to get on the same page. But getting on the same page as soon as possible will definitely be your best option.
Oof, wow.
Yeah.
And what would you tell someone listening who is no longer married, is very broken, and really feels like they don't have hope? How can this ever happen to me? What's something you can tell them?
We know people, personally, that I know what are people that we know very well and personally, like family members who dated their entire life, like well into their late 30s. So many, and it's just like it's never gonna come. Things happen in the right time. I really firmly believe that, and I'll tell you just a very quick story. Is that like I was doing a concert and someone I know, like a girl I had met when I was single, like she messaged me. She's like, "Oh, what time is the show?" And I noticed in her WhatsApp profile, she had a picture with a guy. And I clicked the picture, and she's my age. And this was earlier this year. So the 38, 37. And I noticed in her WhatsApp picture is a picture of her and a guy proposing to her. And I said, wait a minute, like, when did this happen? Turns out, I think he's younger than her. Never would have expected it to happen in that way. And she said to me, she's like, yeah, honestly, it was totally worth the wait. Like, it's not everybody gets those stories, but it's important to, I just heard this great podcast on my run this morning. There were 3 P's. One of them was persistence. I forgot the first one, but the last one was positive. Like, stay positive. Like, positivity attracts positivity, and open yourself up to situations. Like, your time will come. Like, just be open to it. You got to be open to it. If you're closed off and you sit in that closed off way, you're allowing things to just deflect. But if you open yourself up and you're positive and you're open, despite how hard it is, especially how hard it is, usually when it's the hardest, it's like right before the good comes in. That's what I found. So
thank you. That was amazing.
What was the question?
The question was, I know, you're like,
I'm like, wait, I'm so distracted.
Wow. The question was, if someone's listening, I guess you could speak to the woman.
Oh.
And they feel like, how can I believe this will ever happen to me? What might you tell them?
I feel like more often than not, it's always very unexpected. Like, I definitely did not expect to marry someone 10 years older than me with 2 kids. If anything, I thought I was going to marry someone 1 year older than me, never been married before, had no kids. I think it's always in the unexpected. So kind of similar to what Aryeh said, it's not going to hurt you to try. Like, I always tell people that. I'm like, just go on one date. Yeah. Just see. Like, I never would have expected to have anything in common to talk to him about. Never.
But you never
I was
know.
like, what would we have to talk about?
Turns out it was Uncle Moshe.
Your favorite background music while taking your kids to school.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. This has been really moving, inspiring, and definitely very hopeful. Penina and Aryeh, thank you so much for sharing your story of hope. Thank you for watching Stories of Hope. If you want to help contribute to the mission, please reach out to us at soh@meaningfulminute.org. This isn't just another podcast. This is not entertainment. This is true change in the making. And if you want to be a part of it, please help us by sharing, following, liking, and subscribing. We see every comment that goes out there. We see every like on our Instagram page. The only way to make noise is not alone, but it's with a symphony. Join our choir. If you have a story you want to share, question, or comment, please email us at soh@meaningfulminute.org. We can't wait to hear from you.